What is the most terrifying thing that happened during a Zoom call? Last year, a student of mine logged on and told me her mom's boyfriend hit her mommy and her mommy was sleeping in the bathroom and wouldn't get up. She said she was scared and had her toddler sister with her under her bed. I stayed really calm, told her I was going to help. The other kids started joining. I told her to stay on no matter what I said to everyone else. I grabbed my phone and started texting my boss and every other person in our school. Another teacher who I'm close with ran into my classroom. She was a champ and started reading to the kids. We called the police, sent them to our address on file. They were not at the address listed in our contact information. Another parent gets on and is telling me to mute the girl. She isn't supposed to have a sibling in Zoom. The toddler was crying. More people in my classroom are trying to help. I tell everyone but this kid to log off. She's in kindergarten. Can't really read yet, starting begging me not to end the Zoom while trying to calm her sister. This other mother is being a witch. She tells me how long I'm legally supposed to Zoom and all this BS. The principal steps on screen and tells her really nasty to, "Read the room, ma'am. Get off." Everyone but the first kid and one other student log off. He's this really kind boy. I tell him I need him to go. Other student is asking over and over, "Not me, right? I want to stay on. I'm scared." He starts comforting her. We're frantic. We start asking her where she is. Can she get a phone? What does the house look like? All that stuff. Officer shows up at our school. We call the HR. We hear a man yelling at my student to quiet the baby. I felt complete horror and dismay and helpless. The officer who came to our school, small town, knows the family and might have an idea where they are. He sprints out after talking to her and asking her mother's name. We keep trying to comfort her, but she's upset. Like an idiot, I had set my Zoom for 45 minutes and time was coming to an end. I tell her I'm going to send another link, but it cuts off. Every teacher and administrator is now in my class. We all feel helpless. The same questions form everyone over and over. Just a couple minutes later, we get word the cops have found her. I fell on my knees and started to cry. Boyfriend had in fact roughed up mother. He was arrested. Mother was, and as far as I know, in the throes of being a junkie. Little girl and little sister live with grandparents in another state now. I do not typically speak of these things in my personal life. I don't want to gossip or come across as judgmental or virtue signaling. I feel these instances are part of what makes this honest work. This format is helpful for my mental being. I was on the edge of my seat reading this. I could just feel your sense of urgency. Story 2. This story happened to me on my second day of training on my first ever job. So I just graduated in June 2021 and found a job in October 2021. I used to use Zoom for all my university classes, but for work, they use Microsoft Teams. So I'm not familiar with that at all. On the second day of training, we had an important meeting with the vice president of the company. The vice president keeps babbling about things that I do not understand because this is only my second day. So I'm just messing around and I right-click him, so I see the 3 options, I think. Mute, spotlight, pin. So I'm like, mute? That sounds impossible. How can a person who is on their second day of training be able to mute someone, let alone the vice president? So I thought about it for a bit and went, it would definitely mute it on my side only. So I clicked mute. It works. I muted the guy from my side. I tried to right-click and look for unmute, but it didn't work. Until a couple seconds I hear people typing in the chat and also speaking up. "Hey, Vice President, we can't hear you." So he unmutes himself and says, "Somebody just muted me." That's hilarious. At this point, my heart is beating hella fast. This meeting had 150 people plus in it. I typed in the chat, "Sorry, didn't mean to do that." Then tried to unmute myself to apologize, but it took some seconds to register, and then when I told my coworkers, "Yeah, I definitely didn't mean to mute him," I see to my horror that the unmute button worked and everyone heard me say that. Vice President then jokingly told me, "You should have muted yourself, not me." Overall, he took it pretty well and is a super laid-back person, but oh man, that was terrifying. I thought I was fired for sure. Story 3. I work at a school in Lubbock, Texas. Many of my coworkers aren't very good people and we live in a poor area, so the education isn't very good. I always try my hardest to get these kids to want to learn and have fun while doing it. Some of them are very hard to deal with, but we always have fun times. Over quarantine, we obviously still had to have school and the education of the kids came first for me. I would go on Zoom meetings almost every single day to an empty classroom and wait the whole time while no one would join. One day, fairly early to quarantine, this little innocent girl that I've noticed in some of my classes joins the call. She seems to be in her room. By the sounds of it, her family is in there too. We start talking about math since I'm a math teacher, and we didn't really learn anything that day because I was so surprised somebody joined, so we just talked. That started to be our thing. She would join every day, we would talk a little bit, maybe learn a thing or two, but then she would leave. I enjoyed it when I got to spend time with her and talk to her about her day, what she's doing on the weekends and how she is. It was a super sweet time, and I even told my husband that if this girl had a bad home life, I would adopt her. Later in the year, this had been going on for a while. Once in a while, we would get another student that was forced on by a parent, but very, very rarely. It was a normal day with me and her. If I remember right, I was asking her about her weekend. I was just about to get off for my next class period. And I hear what seems to be her father come into the room pretty upset. He accuses her of stealing money and says that he knows she did it. The sweet little girl tries to tell him that I didn't steal anything and I would not do that. I told her if she wanted to mute if she didn't feel comfortable with me hearing that. She didn't even hear me. He was screaming so loud. I just turned on my computer and listened a little bit because I don't want anything going south. Eventually, after he searches the room, he leaves what seems to be satisfied. She sits there just breathing really heavily, and I ask her a couple of times if she's okay, and the first answer was not really. The second one after I said, "Are you sure?" was, "He does this a lot." It made me really sad, but there's not much a teacher can do. About 5 minutes later, I'm about to log off, legitimately in the process of pressing the button, and he comes in. Her face freezes in fear and she stares at him. It wasn't in frame, but I could tell that he was mad. He said he had asked her siblings and they all said it was her. The next few moments were a blur for me, but what I saw was absolutely traumatizing. He raises the gun that he definitely had shot her. I remember immediately calling the police and crying so hard on the phone. She immediately started calling for help and saying, "Help me! Help me! Help me!" I felt so bad I stayed on the call with her for the entirety of till when the police got there. At the end, the police had to have a shootout with a man. He passed on the spot. The ambulance finally got to her room over 30 minutes after I called. She was breathing very slowly. Not much and not good. She gets taken to the ambulance and thank God she survived. The last I've heard of them is that all these kids are in a nice home now, somewhere in a couple counties over. I kept in touch with the foster mom that they're with, and she seems like a great lady. She obviously goes to a different school now, but I hope one day that I can meet her again. Story 4. I was on a team call while my friend was over. She went to take a shower while I was on the meeting. In 80% of my meetings, my camera is off, and she knew that too. But on this particular day, I felt pretty and turned it on. She got out of the shower wearing only her and walked several times in the background until I realized why everyone was blushing in my meeting. It's an understatement to say I felt awkward. She felt terrible, and the rest of the people felt weird. Last year, I used to have these meeting team calls at 9 a.m. Working from home has been a blessing in disguise for someone that is not capable of waking up early. As I didn't have to say much in the meeting, I would stay in bed late and would join from my phone. I forgot to turn off the mic and proceeded to snore the entire meeting until I woke up with someone screaming my name. The shame I felt, it will stick with me. While I was in a design team meeting, I could see that one of the ladies had her kid around and was bugging her. She was muted, so I don't know exactly what was going on there, but at some point the kid approached her and spit right in her face. The camera went off and the rest of us were mortified while some others tried to contain their laughter. I was in my home country for a couple of months and my company agreed for me to work from there. I stayed at my boyfriend's place where his semi-senile grandfather lives too. After pretty much annoying my boss with a very poor internet connection, when I finally managed to get back online and call him, his grandfather came in the room next to me, and while I was trying my best to ignore him and his questions, he came next to me, bent over and put his face in my camera while laughing at my boss's face. Meeting with an external contractor. One of his assistants, most certainly unaware of his camera being on, picked his nose for a good 5 minutes while checking in great detail everything that was coming out of his nose. My boyfriend was on a training course online with around 100 other employees. Someone was watching something explicit and forgot to mute his mic, so it literally blasted on meeting for about 2 to 3 minutes until they managed to get his attention. They all took an hour-long break afterwards. Yeah, reasons like these are exactly why some people did not require mic or video to be on when they were teaching on Zoom. That sucks. Oh, and since you're already halfway through the video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. Story 5. A personal social nightmare. During a discussion-heavy class I was taking last year, I had a question that turned into a 2 to 3 minute back and forth with the teacher as they expounded on my question. Just when they were redirecting the convo back to their PowerPoint slides, one of the girls in the class was on mute and someone in their room, I guess their roommate or something, said, "That guy has such an annoying voice." And the girl responded, "I hate hearing him talk. Every time he opens his mouth, I'm just waiting for him to shut up." Teacher reminded everyone to mute themselves and the girl got wide-eyed and muted herself. We could see her telling her roommate about it and then laughing, but they didn't apologize or anything. There were just a few moments of silence and then the teacher moved on. I stepped away from my computer for a bit and barely ever said anything the rest of the semester. Story 6. Here's a few. It was mandatory to keep our mics and cameras on and my friend's parents were having a screaming match in the background. Maybe not terrifying, but it was horrible. I attended a virtual networking Zoom for work and during the main speaker event, someone unmuted. They were clearly on the phone with someone and started going, "Oh no, I can talk now. It's cool, I'm just on this stupid webinar. I'm not even going to listen to this." Multiple shots being fired at the apartment across from me. I was on my weekly team call when it happened and I was asking questions, so I was unmuted. I went, "Holy crap, those are gunshots," and hit the floor. All my team saw me throwing my headset off and frantically rolling off my couch. Supposedly, my mic picked up me calling 911. Work from home had just begun and we heard a partner at my firm taking a leak. Everyone heard the sound of the water fall in the toilet, and then the flush, and then the hand washing in the sink, and the door closing. Other audience on the call, other junior and senior partners at the firm. I was an admin, so I ran the agenda of these meetings. Didn't regret that role. With regards to that last one, at least they washed their hands. Story 7. At the end of 2019, I was at the office in London, and on a Zoom with about a dozen other folks spread across the US. Got some pretty shocking news during the call. Felt a cold sweat come on, a lightheaded sensation, and then searing, burning pain in my chest. I'd suffered a massive heart attack, and apparently managed to say, I need to go, and then pushed my chair back from my desk and just collapsed. Thankfully, it was still working hours and the office had people in it, so my teammates got me into a safe place, grabbed my nitro spray and called an ambulance, etc., and all was eventually well. I ended up having a quadruple bypass not long after this. Had it been an hour or two later in the day, I'd have probably passed as the office would have been empty. Story 8. At a company I worked for, in a Zoom meeting with the data center the CEO was talking to because they were thinking of purchasing it, a bank of industrial UPSs caught on fire and the fire suppression systems began going off. For reference, they had a system that worked in this order. Chemical extinguisher, a chemical that removes all oxygen from the room, water. One failed and the dude who was in the room was out the door only seconds before 2 went off. Barely made it. Shouldn't have stopped to try to put out the fire. They did not buy the DC, but they hired the tech. Story 9. Not terrifying, but real secondhand embarrassment. We were on a Zoom conference call with a marketing agency. We were their biggest client by a mile, but our relationship had become strained as they weren't delivering results. The purpose of the meeting was for them to A. introduce our new account director, and B. to present the results and action plan back to us. Our marketing manager, ironically called Karen, was giving them a real hard time. The new account director shared her screen but inadvertently shared a Slack on the screen where her and their whole team were chatting crap about us in real time as they were presenting. This included calling Karen a real Karen, and I bet she'll ask to speak to the manager, and saying that they'll have to stop lying to us soon. Karen let them keep it on the screen the whole time and told them at the end. The account director cried. That's why if you're going to talk crap about someone, you do it off premises, across town, at a restaurant, or in your car in the parking garage, like I did. Story 10. Not Zoom, but back in the old TeamSpeak days, we were all on a call and a couple of our guild were from South Africa. All of a sudden, there's all this shouting and noise coming from one of their mics. Muffled, but you can clearly hear stuff like, "Who the heck are you?" and "Get out, get out!" followed by 2 gunshots and silence. It was just left there in TeamSpeak. We're all shouting and the other guy from SA doesn't know the other guy's full real name or where he lives, etc. So we're all powerless. Just this ghost sat in TeamSpeak. By the following morning, he disconnected and we heard nothing for about a week. He eventually just appeared online one day and told us how he'd been broken into. They'd ended his 2 guard dogs and the gunshots were just into the ceiling to make him compliant. The worst part was he told us it wasn't the first time it had happened and gave the other SA guys details in case it ever happened again whilst we were in the chat so we could call the police. Story 11. Not Zoom, as this was pre-Zoom in the early 2000s. Anyhow, back in the day, a friend of mine since I was 12, we were both in our early 20s at the time, passed while in a video chat group online. This group of people watched him on camera, egging him on, then couldn't figure out how to contact anyone since he passed out. His mother found him gone the next morning. He taught me so many things. And because my mother was afraid I would be abducted if alone, as a teenage girl, my platonic friendship with him gave me freedom that I never had before. If he was with me, I could leave the small suburban street I lived on. I could go to the park, bike to the 7-Eleven for a Slurpee, go play some hoops, shoot his potato cannon. He got sucked in by illegal substances and had one rehab attempt under his belt when his mental health and him being a junkie collided with the aid of peer pressure to result in his passing. I saw the chat. The people egging him on were just horrid. I wish he had the chance to pull himself out as I feel like he was one relapse away from redemption. He was so tech-savvy and quick to learn. So much he could have done in the world. Rest in peace. I hope those people that encouraged him to do this never feel a moment's peace. Poor guy. I hope he's at rest. Story 12. Teacher demanded we stay in view with the camera on. I had to use the bathroom. Teacher said, no, I can't leave the camera view, so I said, fine then. And I took the computer to the bathroom and was pooping on camera. Only the upper half of me was visible, so nothing inappropriate was shown. I did leave the mic on as per class policy. The class was all dudes and I was basically famous for a day. Teacher never spoke about it again, but now allowed us to leave for bathroom breaks. Another one was where I needed to shave my beard in same situation but with a different teacher, so I shaved my beard on screen. High school was a crazy time. Story 13. Not terrifying from the outside perspective, but it freaked the soul out of my body. It was senior year of college in 2021. I was living on campus. My girlfriend H was a commuter student. Both of our classes were online, so she would come to campus every day and we would join our respective Zoom classes while sitting together and cuddling. We were sitting in the Divinity school kitchen. Ironic, I know. While I was on a Zoom call with my camera and mic turned off, The kitchen was empty, so as things went by, we started making out. We had been making out pretty intensely for a while until I hear my professor calling my name fairly loudly in the Zoom call. I froze and could literally feel my soul ascend from this mortal shell. Then I slowly turned to my screen. Turns out my mic and camera were still turned off, but the class was over and the professor said he would stay back to take questions. Since I was the only person left in the call, he thought I stayed back to ask questions personally, and that's why he was calling out my name. Story 14. I was on a Zoom call for work right after the pandemic started. My wife and I were both working from home and the schools and daycares were closed too. Normally, we divided up our days so that one of us was working and the other taking care of the kids. One day though, we both had online meetings at the same time, so we turned on the TV and told the kids to just watch TV until one of us was done. I had my headphones on so that I wouldn't be distracted from my meeting, and at some point, I see my wife quickly get up from her chair. Then when I looked at my screen at the window where I could see myself, I saw my 3-year-old behind me frantically clawing at her throat and trying to cough. She was choking on whatever snack she had been eating. My wife was too panicked to really do anything and was just screaming and basically pulling her hair out. I hopped up, leaned the kiddo forward, and just started tapping her on the back. Luckily, she coughed it up, started crying, and I gave her a big hug. A minute or two later, I sat back down to my meeting, put on my headphones, and then realized everyone else in the meeting was just sitting there in shock because they'd witnessed the whole thing. Damn, they should have been clapping. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you made it this far, I'm sure you'll also enjoy what's the most terrifying "we need to leave right now" moment. Story 4 was insane. See you in that video.